Hey guys, welcome back to the 12th podcast of the YTCA. And as usual, my name is Nick.
My name is Theo.
My name is Ezra.
And yeah, I know it's kind of unbelievable. We've already been here 3 months because, well, we do a one every week, and this is the 12th one. So, I hope that you guys are still enjoying these, as always. And if you guys want to, we have our Instagram down below, along with our website with all sorts of different, unique, different sources of information that you guys can take from. There's different things that we put on there, our schedules and things like that. Yeah, just if you guys have time, check both of them out. And yeah, and so without further ado, we're gonna really continue on from last week's topic because if you guys may or may not remember, last week we talked about failures, right? You know, we didn't really talk about solutions last week, right? We just talked about what is failure, right? And how what is failure and how to kind of what is the perspective we should take on failure, right? That's what we talked about last week. This week we're going to try to talk more about coping with failure and how learning how to grow from your failure and moving on to a certain extent. So I guess first thing first, let's talk about coping with failure, right? So after you made a failure, how do you deal with it, right? And I think a really good thing for us to do here is to look towards other people who had failures in their lives, right? Who had who has made mistakes in their lives. How have they coped with it? So, do you guys have any like examples? Do you guys think could think of like either people or even you? Like, how would you do it?
I think, at least in my experience, coping has always been kind of um, been twofold or two-step process. Um, where first you kind of come to the realization that you have failed, that there were things that either could have gone better or you just didn't live up to a certain expectation that you had for yourself or for someone or that someone else gave you. You kind of realize it and you feel really down about it. And then so that's kind of the first step in how I cope with failure. And then the second step is thinking about it and also sharing how I feel with people. Because I think when kind of we're internally thinking about things, sometimes we tend to be a bit irrational when we think about things and just think about them to ourselves, right? Um, like for example, if I were to like do really bad on say like a test, and like I may think irrationally to myself, oh like dang, like I'm struggling really hard with this exam. Maybe I'm just slipping. Maybe I'm just losing my edge. And like, if I don't try really hard, if I don't push myself really hard, I won't succeed in life. And you kind of make irrational decisions or irrational judgments in the moment. So what I like to do is I like to talk about it with other people. I like to talk about how I'm feeling. I like to talk about my own thinking process, kind of how I reach those ideas, because when you vocalize it, you can kind of catch yourself thinking that way, like, hey, wait, no, that doesn't really make that much sense. Like, like one bad test grade is not the end of the world. You know, I can move on from this. It's not the worst thing ever. And secondly, people who you talk with can also catch you on it, and also can also provide like a new perspective um, for you to for you to grow from and for you to cope with. Because like you're only looking at the situation from your point of view, right? And so if you get other people to talk about it with you, especially people who are very involved with your life, like your parents or your friends, people whom you can trust, then when you talk to them about it, they'll be able to provide you with this new perspective, this new point of view that maybe you didn't approach the situation at with that angle. And then through that angle, it kind of helps to cope and also kind of helps make you feel better just in general. Because usually the other person's perspective will be more sympathetic, hopefully.
Yeah, that's really great. Like changing your perspective by, asking for other people's. I think that's a really good way because sometimes, we're so caught up in our failure. Like, oh man, I did really bad on this. I just can't think of any way out of it. And that's why, we should ask our friends, our parents, the people that are close to us. Another thing I want to add is like, I know, Nick, you mentioned, are there any like famous people who have failed? I want to give like a not so up there example. I know we all mentioned Albert Einstein, and he seems like he failed a bunch. I mean, he actually failed school, and yeah, he's a genius. So we may not relate to him that much. But another example would be actually J.K. Rowling. She was, the author of the Harry Potter series, very, popular. But, she actually had a lot of failures in her life. From watching her commencement speech at Harvard, she mentioned that her parents told her to not pursue a literature career even though she liked to do it, and then she kind of made the mistake of pursuing it in a way because her parents wanted her to do something else. And then she had a short-lived marriage with another person, and then from that marriage she had one child, and she was basically facing poverty. Like when you face poverty, and like that kind of in a sense is a failure for her, right? Not like, being able to provide for her family and failing. She kind of had the, one of the biggest failures in life, not being able to provide. Well, the way she viewed it is that she actually failed at a lot of things, but she was only successful in one thing, which was, writing. And she thought that, if I hadn't failed at the other things, I would never have found where I truly felt that I belong. And, she really liked writing, as shown by, the Harry Potter series. So she viewed failure as a way to, strip everything that's inessential and like help you pursue the thing that you really want the most. And usually you're kind of successful at it, right? So that's one example of a person who's gone through failure. Some advice I would give for people to cope with failure is to, you just have to get back up. Like, you can't just dwell on your failures. Like maybe like there's more stuff to do. Like if you're a doctor, my dad told me that he's had patients die on him, unfortunately. And, it's, he has to mourn for them because, if you don't, that's really heartless, right? But, you have to there's other people you have to help. You have to move on. So I know that's a serious example of failure, but it's kind of applicable to us. You just have to get on with your life. Failure is inevitable. We need to go on. In fact, there's this verse in the Bible that's really cool. It's in Proverbs. It says, a righteous man fails 7 times and gets up 7 times. I'm paraphrasing that, but it shows that, even the best people, they fail, but, they get back up. So yeah, you just have to get back up, like, and not dwell on your failure.
Yeah, I think Theo, that's very well put. The idea of don't do dwell on the past. To kind of add on to that, right? It's the idea of time won't stop for you, right? Time doesn't just gonna suddenly stop because you made a mistake. Life moves on, right? You can't really be stuck in the past, right? What is in the past remains in the past, right? There's nothing you can do to change it, right? If you just sit there and basically you express remorse or you express regret for the decisions you made, right? Well, that's all you're gonna do because you cannot change the past. That's one of the things I think is very important. No matter how hard you do, you cannot change your past, but you can impact your future. You can impact the way that you start living, right? And I think one of the great examples of you know the idea of failure, and failure is something that's universal, right? No one said oh, only children fail or only adults fail or something like that, right? Failure is universal, whether you are an older gentleman or woman, or you're a younger child, right? Everyone is prone to failure, right? Take someone, for example, Colonel Sanders, right? I don't know if you guys know who he is. He's the one who founded Kentucky Fried Chicken, known as KFC. You guys know it's a very popular chain restaurant here in the United States. So, it wasn't before he was 62 where he started pitching his ideas to other restaurants. He basically went around with $100 of security check and just be like, hey, do you want my recipe for my fried chicken? Allegedly, hundreds of people rejected him, saying that he was delusional, that he's just an old man, that no one would ever listen to someone like him. It wasn't until he went outside of Utah to a small restaurant, a small family-owned restaurant, where they accepted his idea for a trial run. But what happened was after, and of course after that, the restaurant tripled in profit because of that, and that was the first Kentucky Fried Chicken. You know, he considered, he got so many rejections at that point, and because of his old age, right? A lot of people would have given up already, right? Because people would think, there's no way we can turn around our life. That's just how it is. But I think what is really good here, right, and that he did is that he didn't give up. He used this as something like as a learning opportunity, right? And he preserved on. He did not dwell on the past, like we said, right? He knew that he has failed many times before, but he didn't let that impact his next decision, right? Which is important, right? And I think this kind of relates to the idea that we have to look at the bigger picture whenever we're dealing with coping with mistakes, right? What is the bigger picture in the book, right? What are we supposed to be looking at here, right? For example, right? If for some reason, right? Let's just say, you did bad on a test, like Ezra said, right? Or let's just say, or let's just say, yeah, I think that's a good example. If you did bad on a test, right? Wouldn't you, instead of dwelling on it, wouldn't you go and study and see where you made a mistake on, right? Wouldn't you see what why you've gotten a bad grade on the test, right? Maybe it's this area I'm not understanding. When you have asked friends, asked teachers, whatever, right? To ensure that you get a better score next time, right? So that's the bigger picture, right? An overall excellence, right? Basically, I don't know if you guys know the quote, lose the battle, win the war, right? Yes, right. Sometimes it's more important to kind of lose a small things in order to sacrifice small things, right? Make small mistakes in order to build yourself up to a bigger future instead of failing at it entirely, and on a whole new spectrum. And I think I definitely do agree with Ezra said about seeking comfort in others, right? There are people out there that make mistakes, right? They might have made the same mistake as you, right? They're willing, they're sympathetic, they're willing to listen to you. It's just whether or not you want to reach out to them, right? Sometimes they're not going to reach out to you, right? They won't come to you, but it's important for us to realize, that if they don't come to you, sometimes you have to be the one to like, hey, I made a mistake. Can you help me kind of, look through it and kind of internalize what's happening here, right? So that's really important in my opinion. And so thinking about that, right? And also, having a knowledge of, there's certain things out of your control, right? You cannot control everything. Sometimes failure is because of arbitrariness, right? Sometimes it's randomness. For example, the college system, right? You could do all the hard work you want. You could be the most genius person in the world, but at the end of the day, is it your choice which college you get into? Is it yours? It's to a this to a decent chunk. Yes, it is your responsibility, but in the end, it is the person reviewing your essays, looking at the work you've done, that gets to decide that, right? The admissioners, right? It is on our hands. So no matter how much you cried, oh my gosh, why didn't this guy, want me to go into the college? It's not. If you did what you were supposed to do, right? If you you tried your hardest, that's all that matters then, right? Because you cannot control. But yeah, what do you? Oh, anything else you guys wanted to add for that?
I guess I wanted to add that yeah, going through failure, going through tough times is difficult. And we're not here to downplay that difficulty and failure is something that you can just simply get up from and say, okay, I'm gonna try harder. Because no, difficult failures are hard to recover from. And we don't want to say that that's an easy thing to do. But we do want to emphasize that if you do want to pursue getting back up, like standing back up and being able to try again, then, which we do encourage, then, reaching out to other people, talking about it with them is a great way to do so. And being able to share that, understand new perspectives, and cope correctly with failure is that's a great way to cope with failure. Um, and one thing I want to add before I guess we move on would be um, that if you are emotionally stable enough, and you have the time, make it an effort to reach out to people who are struggling, who are maybe going through failure themselves, right? because everyone goes through it once in a while, if not a lot of the time. And it's important that we, as not only the people who do fail, but also the people who see others fail, it is important that we reach out, that we make an effort to care for them, make an effort to comfort them. You know, we're called to love our neighbors and love our enemies. And so, in loving them, we reach out to them in their failure, in their grief, and try to comfort them, try to help them cope correctly.
Yeah, I think that's well put. You know, sometimes you have to be the initiator, right? You also have to kind of go out of their way, you know, because if you're there for them, I will guarantee you they'll be there for you most of the times, right?
Mm.
So yeah, it's kind of like, you know, the idea, you know, where for those of you who believe in Christ, you know, if you guys are brothers and sisters in Christ, right? God has a mission to call us to help each other, right? To help each other in need, right? Because we are one. We're one for all for one, right? As they say. But basically, next I think we were going to move on to the idea of, you know, after we can cope with it, after we are comfortable with the mistake. Actually, I shouldn't say comfortable, but I guess after we're even, we understood what we made a mistake on. Next thing is to move on, how to grow from that, right? So um I guess any of you guys want to share kind of what you guys did to grow from your mistakes, and like, you know, what techniques or like, you know, what mindsets you guys have to like kind of help assist you in the growth of mistakes and making sure it doesn't happen again.
I guess I'll take this one. So there's a couple of TED Talks about failure. One of them is by, I forgot her name, but it started with Carol, I think. That's her first name, I think. And she's explains about the growth mindset. Basically, it's the mindset that you can improve even though you fail. Like, it's basically saying that I'm not there yet. Like, you know, I'm not at this level yet. You know, the word yet implies that you'll reach there eventually, right? One day, even though you may fail right now. So just, I guess this goes with coping failure a little bit. Like, you should see failures as, you know, not yet, right? I'm not yet, I'm not a big failure. I'm just not yet at the place where I want to be. And then another thing is grit. That's by Angela Duckworth. It's the idea of sustained passion and perseverance for a long-term goal. People say, well, she says that people with grit are able to, you know, learn from their failures and continue on to pursue their goal and eventually become successful. I mean, it makes sense, right? If you really want to achieve something and you won't let anything deter you, even failure, you probably, you know, will achieve your goal. This kind of goes under the cope category. So I guess for grow, one thing to do is you have to actively assess why you failed. You can't just say, oh, I failed. Maybe I'll just do better next time, right? You have to say, maybe because I didn't, you know, get enough sleep yesterday for tomorrow's test. Or like, oh, maybe my studying method wasn't, you know, super effective. So you have to like actively evaluate yourself on why you failed. And sometimes it's really hard to do that because like sometimes we think like, man, I'm trying the hardest I can. Like this is just a tough class, right? But you know, like what Ezra said, you can just ask for help, right? Ask for other people's perspectives and maybe they can provide some light on your failure. Like for me, I'll give a personal story. I was in AP Physics in freshman year. It was a super tough class, and I have to admit, like I got a C on the first test. I was like, man, what am I doing wrong? I'm studying all the worksheets. I'm like doing the best I can. Like, how come I got this okay grade? Well, not okay for me on this test. Well, my mom pointed out to me that, you know, I wasn't really studying correctly. I was studying like the worksheets and stuff, but I should like give myself problems from, you know, the internet. In physics, like you have to do a bunch of these word problems. So she said it was like a really good idea to do word problems like everywhere. Just do them on the internet. Just do a bunch of problems. So that's what I did, and eventually, you know, I did better on future tests. So if you don't know what's wrong and why you failed, you know, you can just ask for other people's help. Like, hey, do you know why you think I failed? And they can say, oh, you failed because so and so and so.
Mm. That's something that I really agree with, Theo. And I think that asking for help, asking others for their opinions, especially for people who live with you or people who kind of know your routine, who know who you are. It doesn't even have to be like academic failure. It can be anything. It can be failures in relationships. It can be like a fight that you had with like your parents or your friends, or it can be maybe you just weren't able to do something, like you forgot about something, or you weren't able to do something and you feel really bad about it, and like you want to grow but you don't know how, or you start questioning, yeah, like I put so much effort into it, why is nothing happening, why am I not getting the results that I want? And I think asking other people for help is a great way to um, kind of understand yourself, and also understand like that, at the end of the day, if you tried your hardest, if you did your best, I think asking other people um, how to kind of channel that kind of effort in a more productive way can be really helpful, and it can be really tough too. I know for myself, like I have a very hard time asking for help, at least because I normally say to I normally have like this like kind of pride, like, oh, I can do it on my own, I can if I just put in enough effort. And that kind of pride and that kind of thinking makes it really hard for me to ask for help. But like every single time I have asked for help, like I keep like coming back to the realization that, man, this is so much easier when I asked for help. This is so much easier when I started to listen to someone else, when I started to get a new perspective. Because like, we're human beings, and we like to have our own system, or we like to do things our way, right? you know, I like to study this certain way, and like, or I like to get my work done this certain way. I like to handle my relationships in this kind of manner. And that makes it really hard for us to open up to new ways of thinking and new ways of going about things, especially if it's like a very integral part of our lives. Like for us, it would be like homework. Homework is something we do every day. And when you ask for help, it may feel like you're kind of giving up, that you're kind of letting someone else kind of help you, and that might be more effort than your own way of doing it. But like I said before, every single time that I've asked for help, that I was like at a low point and I failed, and I genuinely asked for help, I found it so relieving and so incredibly amazing to ask for help, and for people to, give me input. And through that, I was able to grow. I was able to kind of get back on track. Um, yeah.
Yeah, I definitely have to agree with you guys on that. Honestly, to be honest, for me too, sometimes it's hard for me to ask help because, like, I guess it's like societal. So there's a little bit of pressure being like, oh, everyone sees me as I don't know, smart person, right? They'll be like, oh yeah, you understood everything, right? They don't really expect me to be the one asking help, right? So sometimes it's like my own ego or something like that. I'm like, you know what? I have to kind of maintain it. I have to make sure that people sees the good me, right? The person that's always smart. I'd be like, oh yeah, this guy knows everything on a test and stuff like that, right? So yes, I used to neglect asking questions a lot and like asking for help from others when I have mistakes. And sometimes I intentionally try to cover up my mistakes. Like I was like, oh no, that never happened, never happened. I don't know what you're talking about, right? But that's actually really hurting me, right? Covering up your mistakes is the opposite of learning and growing from your mistakes, right? First thing first, I think the most important thing about growing is you have to acknowledge it. You have to make sure that you are come to term with it, right? You have to understand that this is a mistake I made, right? And establish like a plan, right, of growth. Now, growth is something that's not something that's something that's subjective, right? It's different. Growth for you might be growth for me might be very different, right? And the rate of it and how much you grow is very different. That doesn't mean you didn't grow. I can't say that you didn't grow or you grew. It's just we grow at different rates, right? So keep that in mind, which I think is important because you cannot measure someone else's growth by your growth, right? So basically, whenever you see, let's just say I don't know, I got a C on my last test. And the next test, someone else, their growth might be, hey, I'm gonna get an A, right? Maybe for you, maybe it's like I'll get like a B or a B plus, right? Some people are like, oh yeah, that's bad. Well, but I'll tell them, how do you know it's bad? He grew, he improved, right? He improved because of what he put in, right? And I don't believe that everyone improves at the same rate. Right? There's different people improve at a different rate, and that's fine, right? It doesn't matter how much and how far you go. It just matters that you are progressing in the right direction. That's what it matters in the end, right? You're growing from it. Right? And another problem, I think to grow from a mistake is to kind of look at the mistake and make sure you remember why you did it. Make sure you know why you did it, because you don't want to be making the same mistake over and over again, right? Like, for example, if I didn't study for the test this time, I'll be like, okay, my mistake, I didn't study. Next time I'll study for this test. But if you don't study for it again, then now you have to look very closely, right? Think about, hey, why did this happen again, right? Why did this happen again? And you have to make sure that the mistakes won't repeat themselves. New mistakes are sometimes hard to control, but the mistakes are repeating over and over again, right? Procrastination, right? Different things like that, right? That is in your control. And I believe that, you should pay attention to it, right? You should try to control it, because, well, as I said in the last podcast, Albert Einstein defined the definition of insanity of doing something over and over again, expecting different results. If you're making the same mistakes over and over again, right, and expecting something else to change, nothing will change because you didn't change your approach, right? So I think it's important for us to realize that, the uh, the concepts, right? Basically, in order to learn from your mistakes, you have to first realize what you've done, right? Come to terms with it, and also make sure it doesn't ever happen again. Or, well, you'll be basically tripping on the same branch over and over again, which, I mean, that hinders growth, right? And so, I guess to kind of round it off today, I want to talk about, let's look at it from a Christian perspective, right? You know, growth is something, basically, as we know, God created everyone differently, right? Uniquely, right? And God gave us this kind of gift to live on earth because, well, he gave us this gift of learning, right? He gives us this room to make mistakes, right? God could just basically say, hey, no mistakes from anyone. Boom, no mistakes. We could have that could have just been done, but it isn't, because God wants us to learn, wants us to kind of go through that process, right? It kind of really helps us to establish emotional resilience, right? A mental resilience, right? Kind of how to bounce back from something like that, right? Which is important. But what do you guys think about the Christian perspective?
I guess you can say that failure makes people a lot humbler because, if you never failed in your life, like you're going to get very arrogant, right? And like it's really hard for you to form connections with other people, especially other Christians. Like, let's say this Christian hasn't failed at all in anything, like that person probably won't be able to make connections as with their fellow brothers and sisters. And I think that connections, in the church is like very necessary for like, being a Christian and all that. Another thing is that, failure constantly reminds us that, we're not perfect and that we need God's love and everything, right? So there's this example of Peter in the Bible. He was actually one of the disciples the of Jesus, and he actually, one of the stories was him denying the Lord Jesus 3 times, and it was pretty unfortunate because he was a close friend of Jesus, and like the fact that he would deny him, right, 3 times is like a pretty big failure, right? But like after that, he came to terms with it, and like, he picked up his feet, continued being a Christian. So if I were to give one message about this, is that, it's not really easy to apply everything we've heard or spoke about in this podcast. Like the fact we're having a podcast about it means that, it's really hard to do the things that we're saying. So just don't give up, like Nick said, growth is something that could be hidden, like a plant in the ground. It could be growing with its roots, right? You don't see the roots at all, but it's growing, right? So just don't be discouraged. Keep trying, keep trying to ask for help, even though it may be, you know, painful. Sorry if I took too much time there.
No, I think that's a great finishing message to send off, because yeah, that is what we're talking about. Nick, would you like to?
Yeah,
end this off?
basically, just remember, as a fellow Christian, you know, help your brothers and sisters out. As Ezra said, you know, help them out during the time of need. I know they'll help you out. You know, during this, of course, during the COVID-19 pandemic, it is especially important to kind of, you know, support each other, right? So make sure, you know, talk to those around you, right? Talk to your friend, talk to your family, talk to your pastor, talk to your teacher, talk to anyone that you trust, right? And talk to them about your failures. They'll be more than happy to help you out. But yeah, with that being said, you know, that will conclude today's podcast. And Ezra, would you like to talk about the small group before we go?
Oh yeah, sure. So yeah, our support group, if you guys don't know, is kind of this group where we, you know, bond with each other. We want to create this intimate community where you can talk and we can just hang out, especially during the pandemic when it's really hard to get social interaction nowadays. Um, so if you're interested, we will leave an interest form down below where we can send you more information about it, and we can get to know you a bit better so that yeah, you can hopefully join us. And yeah, if especially if you're dealing with like failure or you just want to talk about it, I think this support group is a great way to kind of you know, kind of as what we've been saying, talk about it and cope and grow from it.
Yeah, don't worry, we won't bite your head off. So we're nice people. Like genuinely, we genuinely we're the purpose of we're here. We're trying to help you guys. So just know that, you know, we're nice people. All right. But yeah, with that being said, you know, again, thank you guys for listening. You know, I hope that, you know, whatever you guys are dealing with, that, you know, you have someone else to talk with. If not, we're here. Please come and talk to us. And yeah, hope that you guys are having a nice week, and I'll see you guys next week. All right. Bye, guys.
Bye.